All right.
Good evening. It is 8:34, and I'd like to call to order the special meeting of the Common Council for July 6th, 2023. If you'll please rise and join me in pledging allegiance to our nation's flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United
United
States
States
of
America,
and
to the republic
for which it
for which it stands,
one
nation, under God, indivisible,
with justice for all.
Liberty and justice for all.
justice for all.
Mrs. Dixon, if you'll please call the roll.
Mr. Burnett,
Present.
Mr. Camacho, Mr. Goldstein.
Here.
Ms. Najilski Eichner,
Present.
Ms. Smith,
Here.
Ms. Ayers, Mr. Eveluz,
Here.
Mr. Kites, Ms. McMurr, Ms. Alterman, Mr. Meek, Ms. Shanahan, Mr. Frere.
Here.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We have 6 Common Council members present.
Thank you. Next item we would open is the public participation. Is there anybody waiting to comment to the council?
If you'd like to speak, please raise your hand electronically now and I will unmute you. We just have one person, but they do not have their hand raised. Nicole.
Okay, and
And Mr. Mayor, can we just, for the record, take a roll call of the charter revision members?
if you would do that, yes, please.
Yeah, okay, so Patsy Brescia, obviously here, Carl Dickens,
Here.
Tyler Fairpin, Tyler?
I am here, Betsy.
Yeah, yes. And I believe that's it for us this evening.
Okay, and let the record show that and Mr. Camacho has just joined. And also let the record show that Mr. Mednick will be presenting this evening. So Mr. Burnett, I'll turn the floor over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Moving on to item 4 on the special meeting agenda, which is to review Articles 9 to completion to the end of the draft report of the Charter Revision Commission. And this will be the third workshop of the Common Council on the Charter Revision recommendations from the Commission. And at this time, I will turn it over to Attorney Stephen Mednick to lead us in the workshop discussion of the remaining articles. Mr. Mednick.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President, Mayor, members of the council and our friends of the Charter Commission. Can everybody see on the screen the document? Article 9, good. So let me explain what I've done here. 2 of your colleagues, Nora and Councilmember McMurr, did provide some comments, and so this document will show some of the edit changes that were made. And I want to say that I am very grateful to the councilwoman, the council member Nora, for the work that she has done well beyond the call of duty, making sure that I try to remember my grammatical weaknesses, and she's put me to shame, and we've cleaned up the document quite a bit in that regard, and among other catches that were made in this process. And then there are some substantive questions. So I will stop to try to address those as we get to them, or have the council members raise it. As I say, Councilmember McMurray is not here, but I will raise her questions as we get to them. So this is the section on education. There's really no substantive change that we've made in this section. We deal with the composition of the board. What you'll see is instead of a breakdown that we have in the current charter where everything's kind of put into like a wall of words, we do have a breakdown of the various provisions that are involved here. Councilmember McMurray raised a question in subparagraph 6 of 9-1A about using the term election of superintendent. And should we be talking about the hiring of the superintendent? And my comment is that election is the statutory word. They basically by statute say that the Board of Education shall elect a superintendent. And so it's a very simple response. There really isn't much else to say in that regard. I believe that somebody had raised the issue. Let me just see here. Hold on. The question in the next paragraph, you're going to see a change, a little bit of a change. At the end of 6, there was language that basically authorized the superintendent of schools to employ various folks in the support of the system, and the assistants, principals, teachers, etc. That language was attached to the selection or election of the school superintendent. One of the council members recommended that we merge it with the next sentence, the next paragraph, which dealt with other appointments. And we will, so it made sense to do so. The only reason I had kept it with the other one is that it was attached to it in the current charter. Councilmember McMurray raised the question, and I don't have an answer for this one, is so we know what hiring a principal means, or hiring the various folks that work in the system. The original sentence, this one right here, which talks about the board may make such appointments before any appropriation has been made to cover the salaries of the persons appointed, and 8-2D2 shall not apply to such obligations. And so the councilmember raised the question, what does this mean? What does this do? Do we have any examples? And the answer is, I do not have any examples. And so I would ask members of the council, ask the mayor, do we know whether this provision, it's a pretty interesting provision. I think we might have talked about it.
Yeah.
We didn't change anything at the charter commission level because you want to be careful about picking a fight with the Board of Education. I'm not sure this is sensible language, maybe something you look at a couple of years, but it seems pretty interesting that that language exists. And I don't know whether anybody in the government has had any experience with that language.
I think it could apply because at a lot of the board meetings, they'll hire different administrators, they'll hire teachers in various positions, and it always comes before a vote of the Board of Education. So I don't know if that would apply. It looks like they may make appointments before any appropriation. So they can make the appointment even before there's been a salary adjustment or money allocated for those positions. I mean, that's what I think it could be.
So they can hire in this fiscal year to start on July 1 when the funds would be available.
Well, it looks like before any appropriation has been made.
Yeah.
So I would think that, let's say that they want to hire an assistant superintendent in charge of curriculum. The person's name and resume would be put before the board, and they would vote on it at a meeting. And they would also include in that vote the salary that that person would be paid. So I think that's probably what that's referring to.
Okay.
I don't know if
Yeah.
anybody else has a different interpretation.
I just want to comment that we did spend quite a bit of time talking about this number 7 because it's very confusing and we weren't sure. So we decided to, as Steve said, we decided to leave it and see if anybody else had any additional information on that.
Well, I do sit in on a lot of the board meetings and I do see on the agenda various appointments from time to time. And again, they talk about the salary and obviously they have their budget. So even if they appoint somebody, let's say they do appoint a deputy superintendent in charge of curriculum, that still has to come out of their allocation that we gave them for that fiscal year. So I don't know before any appropriation has been made. So I imagine they have to adjust their line items or their salary or or their budget.
Thank you, Mayor. I mean, it just kind of confirms my thought, and I think the thought of the commission, that we would just leave it in place. If it hasn't done any harm, it's something we could look at, you could look at within the next 2 years when you do the other charter. It just does not make sense to, we were talking about bears, you don't want to wake up a sleeping bear. Because we just don't know what the implications are if we were to eliminate this language, even if we don't fully understand it. Madam Chair, Patsy, do you have your hand up?
Yep.
Or is that?
No, I didn't take it down.
Okay.
Sorry.
All right. Council member Nujolski Eichner had a question regarding, get to the next sentence, just talks about the duties of the board. Nothing surprising here, nothing unique. And I made some changes based on some questions that were raised, some tense issues and whatnot. Council member Nujolski Eichner had a question in the last sentence that the board is further authorized to make its bylaws, define the duties of its officers and committees, and prescribe rules and regulations for discipline in the public schools. I think that her point was, can't they do this under the statutes? And the answer is yes, they can. It's a provision that has been in the charter, and I think we just made a judgment call that without consulting with them, without discussing it with them, we would not try to raise any issues that might be have unintended consequences. So again, my thought is that when we look at this 2 years from now, in the next 2 years, we might want to go to the Board of Ed and talk to them about their chapter or their article and see what reforms and revisions we might be able to make in that regard. Now, things like board reports, which is the next, I'm sorry, did I cover your issue, Nora?
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's fine. Rules and regulations for the public schools, which would be fine. That just having it limited to discipline seemed odd, but if that's the current language, let's not mess.
Well, we can say discipline and other matters. I don't, but I again, with the exception of adding the word further and changing some of the ways we approach, the chair, Patsy, will tell you that on a couple of minor issues, we had a major brouhaha. So we just want to try to go slow unless we need to do otherwise. And the next,
makes sense.
Yep. And the next issue is one of the next issue is board reports. This is a provision that you want to make sure you keep in your charter as the reporting requirements. The reporting requirements is a new provision, I believe. Yes, it is. And this caused a major brouhaha. We were trying to, and we worked it out. Spent a lot of time talking to their counsel. And the idea here for the members of the council was that we want to make sure that, and we want to make sure that the council and the Board of Estimate and Taxation and the mayor gets on a quarterly basis a report on all their agreements, memoranda, made a slight change at the request of a couple of the council members. And if any council members object to any of these minor changes, please raise them. I thought that they were sufficiently Scrivener type things that I would make those changes. I did not change anything substantively. And so, if you do think you like the other language, please raise your hands and let us know that you think we should restore it to where it is. The idea here was to try to get a real understanding of what kind of contracts they're entering, and not because you're going to try to stop them or you're prying, but you want to make sure that they're not entering multi-year agreements under the cover of option agreements, of other provisions for extensions, that if they're putting out a contract with an extension agreement or an option agreement, it is a multi-year agreement. And multi-year agreements need to be approved by the legislative body. So the objective here is to get regular reporting from the Board of Ed so that you can take a look. And I specifically refer to extensions, options, renewals, all those types of issues to make sure that they understand, and they do understand, that they have to come to you for multi-year agreements. So that's the purpose of that section. Councilmember McMurray, or let's go back to 8-3, 9-3. She raised 2 points on this page, and I hope you don't mind this. I just wanted to speak for her since she was kind enough to send her comments in. She wanted to know whether 9-3 happens now. And I think I said the provision was new. No, the provision is new, so it does not happen now. So that's a new reporting requirement. And so is for 9-4 as well. She asked in 9-4 whether this is new, and the answer is yes, and how we would enforce this provision. Well, I think that you have 3 bodies that are going to be getting these reports. Whichever body is most interested in getting those reports would probably know if the reports are not coming in, or be informed that the reports are not coming in, and simply ask the Board of Education to provide the report. Do you have subpoena authority? Can you lock them into the basement of City Hall until they give you the reports? You'll have to decide how to do that. You probably can do an ordinance requiring the department head to do it, and you can probably establish some kind of a penalty that you're entitled to do under state law. But the idea is that you're hoping with the cooperation clauses in the charter that the Board of Ed would provide and support this provision. And the fact is, they did agree to the language when we recommended. So I see a couple of hands, Councilmember Freire and Chair Brescia.
Thank you. Maybe I'm just misunderstanding this, but you just said that this 9-3 is changed. It's new.
I believe it's new.
Because that seems like the process that we've been following. I've been on the Board of Estimate and Taxation for a number of years, and that seems to be the same process we've always followed.
I'll take a look at that.
Yeah. Mhm.
I'll take a look at the annotation on that, council member,
yeah.
to make sure that that is correct. Because I thought it was an older provision as well. 9-4 is new, but I will check out the codification, the code on 9-3 to make sure that that is that it's properly annotated.
Yeah, in 9-3, I think the only thing that is new is the last sentence, I believe. They don't report monthly to the mayor or chief financial officer. I mean, the chief financial officer can gain access to their expenditures and allocations, but I don't think that they report on a monthly basis. Jim, do you recall that?
Yeah, I think in the CFO provides detailed information of what the actual versus the budget is on a regular monthly basis. So we see that. Whether people actually look at it and comment on it is maybe something else. I mean,
Yeah, he does that for the entire city, actually.
yeah, and the
Yeah.
Board of Ed is in there and it does break it down into major categories. I mean,
Right.
you don't get a lot of visibility out of it, but it's there.
Okay. I wanted to just add that these two sections really took up most of the discussion with members of the Board of Education when we had them in for one of our meetings. My recollection is the timing was not the same, that their submission wasn't at the same time as the rest of the departments. We spent a lot of time talking about that. But then on 9.4, that was a major compromise, and their position was, with regard to reporting, is that the mayor sits on the board and has access to all the information that the board members, and therefore that complied with their need to do a report to the mayor. So that was the position that they took.
They took the position that the mayor would provide us with all the contracts, and we
Yeah,
ultimately
I think-
persuaded them that they
I
should really
think they're
do that.
taking
for
some
us.
liberties with that, but that's, yeah,
But we
Yeah,
we didn't agree. The commission did not agree with that.
right.
Councilmember Goldstein.
Yeah, I mean, I think the mayor is more or less alluding to, I think, what might be an issue here, which is it's not exactly clear what the report is supposed to say, other than, quote, a comparison of actual and estimated expenditures. But just by pointing and saying, oh, you can go, to Munis or whatever, or the database and pull the data, would not constitute a report as I read this language. I just want to make sure that everyone is very clear on what a report actually looks like, because I'm wondering if there are going to be fights on what's considered a report.
Are we talking about 9-4?
9.3.
9.3.
Excuse me, I don't understand what your concern is there. What is a report?
It says in 9.3 that the board is further required to report monthly to the mayor a comparison of actual and estimated expenditures. My concern was if they take the position that the mayor has access to all the information that's tantamount to a report, and therefore they don't actually have to provide an actual report, that could ensue a conflict that would be nice to avoid. Perhaps I'm overreading this, but that was my initial concern with this language.
Well, my experience on the Board of Estimate and Taxation is that there is no specific reports from any departments saying this is what my budget is this past month, this is what my actual is, this is an analysis of the variance. None of them do that. It's all in the Munis system. And we get the same thing, whether it be the police department, fire department, or the Board of Ed. It's all exactly the same report. It's a monthly report that comes out that shows you the budget, revisions to the budget, actual year to date, and what the variance is. If you want to ask a question about why do you have this significant variance, that was our prerogative at Board of Estimate and Taxation meetings every month.
But
I
I'm
don't
not
know what
sure,
else you would need, to be honest with you.
if I may, I'm not sure that it was a report that they prepared. I think it's a report that the finance department prepared based on what's come in and what's outstanding, with the controller's office. Like, basically, it wasn't something that we specifically received from the departments. It was something that was put together by finance based on the information that they had, the bills that they had to pay and things like that. I think this requires the Board of Ed to be proactive in that regard, as opposed to just have the finance department rely on the information that it has just in the ordinary course.
I don't mean to belabor the point, but it would be the same thing. The Board of Ed is no different than any other department. And that's, yes, you know, if you're not going to take the numbers out of Munis, which is the city's records, then what's the point of having a report? So, I mean, it's, you're looking at the data, you know.
I agree. Yeah, I
it's-
agree.
I
It
don't
doesn't
see
really add
that.
anything.
Okay.
So am I hearing, not to formulate a proposal for anybody, am I hearing a question as to whether or not that last sentence, which I highlighted, is necessary? Is that what Councilmember Freyer is suggesting?
I mean, it sounds like to me, it doesn't seem necessary. Because, you know, what does it really mean? A lot of these, I think we learned, I think on the BET, it became evident that a lot of expenditures occurred toward the very end of the fiscal cycle. And a lot of things came in after were incurred, but not yet due till after the, cycle had completed. So there's really no value in doing a month-to-month thing, because it's not as if the stream of expenses are consistent in any way from month to month.
Well, I mean, I think you're absolutely right. And it's the information that's out there that they're giving. We have access, or, the Board of Estimate has access, the mayor has access, the council has access to the raw data. It's in a format that anybody can look at it. And if they've got a question on it, I mean, basically, you're saying if you want to get a special, if this highlighted sentence is to get a more definitive report from the Board of Estimate, then it should be, or from the Board of Education, it should be for all departments. But it's then going to be additional work for them where the information is already available. I think that was my first question. I said, what is it that they don't have, that we don't get now, that we are going to get? We're not going to get anything different. I mean, that's what it is. This is what the actual expenses were. This is what the estimated were. Here's the difference. If you got a question about it, and to Ed's point, it happens every time, that if there's a huge under or over, the answer for that particular month is probably that it's a timing issue, that we didn't pay something the previous month, but we paid it this month. So you see more this month than you did last month, and so on and so forth. So when you get to the end of the year, it really becomes a lot more meaningful. But I think it's kind of superfluous for right now, because
I
it is what it
just
is.
marked it.
Mr. Mednick,
Yes, sir, Mr. President.
thank you. My question as it relates to 9-3 is the comment relating to the council. There's no reporting. Yes, the mayor has, as he sits on the Board of Education, has access to the information, the chief financial officer, the BET, but there's currently no reporting to the council through any committee of any of these expenditures. So my question is this a new item that the council in some shape or form will be receiving these quote unquote reports?
Well, it would not just be the council, it was all the others who probably have access to the data. I'm trying to remember the genesis. I see Carl has his hand up. Maybe he does. I'm trying to remember.
As I recall it, Greg, Ed, and Jim have all kind of encapsulated this now. That was the sticking point. That the point was made that they already do this, it's available. And they saw this as something, I think, one, it was kind of territorial, but it got off of that. It really boiled down to where it was time consuming to do this again. They didn't have enough people to do this. They'd have to maybe hire somebody to do this type of thing. And they pushed back rather hard that this was a report that they would have to do that they felt is already out there.
And I think that's right. I think it's frankly a waste of their time, because it's something that we could get from the finance department.
Right.
It's already available. It's not like, it doesn't require a specific report. And if it does from them, then it should be a report from every single department. And I don't think any single department does that kind of reporting. I think it all comes from the finance department.
And that's
Just based on
exactly, and that's
that we have.
exactly Ed, how I remembered it. That's was the sticking point.
Yeah, I think that makes sense though. So
Yeah, again, I'll look at the history of this. It might be the annotation might be off on it. I'm even, as I'm reading it again, we haven't read this in a while. Even the first part of it, the first two sentences seem more appropriate to go into the budget section altogether. As I'm looking at it. So I marked it, and let me just use this as a teaching moment. In this process, you're going to have your next meeting is your public hearing, and then your meeting thereafter is the meeting where you vote on the recommendations you're going to make to the Charter Revision Commission. So I've marked this because it sounds like at least a few of you, maybe many of you, would be interested in asking the commission to take another look at this and possibly eliminate it or make it more universal. However it is you want to approach it. So what you need to think about, I will mark them, and what I'll try to do with the president is draw up a list of the things that have come in as a result of discussions, because I've been taking pretty careful notes and marking up the document based on our meetings here. We'll probably have a general recommendation to, fix all the erratas, the Scrivener's corrections, those kinds of things, some of the other editorial type things. So we don't need to mark each one, but things like this, we're probably going to have to put as a separate item for the commission to consider for its final report. So I just wanted to stop there, since we've kind of found something that there's some ambiguity and concern about. So I apologize if I'm going on too long, but I wanted to give you an idea of how we should be thinking as we're going through this
If I
process.
could just make a recommendation also,
Yes,
you
ma'am.
might have our chief financial officer just take a look at those and get his feedback, even if it's only a couple of minutes, just what he thinks about it.
Yeah, I will. He spent a lot of time on the budget section with us.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure he looked at this section, but I'll call him, call Henry, if not tomorrow, Monday.
Thanks.
Are there any other issues? That's kind of it for the Board of Ed. Now we go into the budget section of the document. And so what we tried to do here is we tried to restructure a lot of new provisions here. We have the cooperation clauses. I've been putting cooperation clauses in throughout the state. They don't have any self-executing authority, but by virtue of being in the constitutional document, it gives a mayor an ability to deal with an errant agency. Usually it could be a board of education. I don't think you had that problem in Norwalk. Other communities, the relationship between the city, the general government, and boards of education can be tenuous. And so the cooperation clauses came up as a result of those tenuous relationships. But some of the mayors have found this to be very, very useful and very helpful as we put them into the charters. We also break down the operating, kind of a broad definition of the operating and capital budgets. Councilmember Eichner did raise a question about 2-year projections. I don't know what she means by, is that substantive enough? It's her understanding that the practice of doing so, they had this in the past, although that would need to be confirmed. You can do projections. I think we have them next door. I just redid the Stanford budget provisions, and they wanted to go to a 2-year budget, which you can't do because the mill rate comes out on an annual basis. We're not a sovereign. We have to kind of live with the way the state laws require us to do the budgets. But you can certainly do projections if that's of some interest to you. And so if there's a general interest in that issue that was raised by the council member, I can talk to Henry about some of his thoughts on that. If 2-year projections are something that there's general interest in. we can, it might be a recommendation that you ask us to take a look at. So I just wanted to raise that. Did I get your question correctly?
Absolutely. And what I meant by the substantive, I know we're not trying to make structural changes. So I want to be leery of raising things that might be perceived as structural changes. That said, I find the multi-year projections extremely helpful in terms of the capital budget. I think it would be extremely helpful in terms of the operating budget as well. And this seems like an opportunity to raise that. And it was my understanding, someone had told me that this did used to happen in the past. I don't know if that's correct or not, but if so, then it would seem like less of a new thing and more of a codification of practices we have engaged in.
Yeah, and what we might be able to do, we obviously want to talk to the mayor, obviously, who's here. From an administrative point of view, might want to talk to the Board of Estimate as well to see whether there's receptivity to that. It's really a reporting issue. And the real question is whether our systems are set up to handle that. Obviously, you do it on the capital side. You would think you'd be able to do it on the operating side. So my thought on that is that if you're interested in that, talk to your colleagues, try to get back to the president or to me, so that we can begin to think about what we might want to do to draft. For purposes in the next 2 weeks, before you take this action, we don't need to do a lot, but if you're interested, it'd be nicer to have more information to go back to the commission as opposed to less. So it's legally feasible. The issue is whether or not it's the kind of thing that if you got consensus on, you would be able to move forward without much controversy.
Sure. And if you're talking to Henry anyway, it might also, I'd be curious to hear Henry's thoughts on that.
Okay, I'll be happy to do that. And I see Councilman Frere has his hand up.
Yeah, I would just second that. You've got to talk to Henry about that. That's, it's hard enough to do the budget today with 1 year, going out 1 year, to start to, and I think we're just gaining some traction with them after this past year's budget, where we hit them a little bit hard from the Board of Estimates standpoint that they really held their feet to the fire as to exactly why they're spending the money that they're spending. I think that Henry can talk a lot more intelligently on this subject, because it's going to take manpower to start to analyze all of the needs and check what those needs are for the city, for the operating department. So I would get his take on that, and I wouldn't be really excited if they couldn't do it right away. I think it's something that's going to have to be
Transition
done over a number of years.
Yeah, I was going to just say, Councilmember, I think it's the kind of thing either way that's really going to require a transition, because it's not just a structural change for Henry, it's a structural change for all your department heads.
It's a learning curve for all.
Yeah, it's a huge learning curve.
We found it very, very clear in talking to all the department heads that they were really not as astute in budgeting as maybe we had thought in the past.
Okay.
I'll
bring it up with Henry and see what he thinks. I think it's the kind of thing I would also say, the commission didn't spend, and correct me if I'm wrong, Madam Chair, we didn't spend any time really discussing this issue. It's the kind of thing I think you'd want to do more due diligence on, as opposed to just jumping into it. But it might be an issue that's worth thinking about in the next 2 years. But I will talk to Henry about the issue when I give him a call. Madam Chair.
Yeah, no, we had no discussion on the issue.
Okay, thank you. So as we move on in this section, let me see if there's anything else. Let's see where her Councilmember McMurray's question goes to the fiscal year, or we'll get there in a second. We simply lay out, self-evident, the fiscal year is what it is, started this past week. I guess there are questions on public inspection, which we'll get to in a minute. So we have these new provisions in here regarding public inspections, made some changes. I will take further review of it to make sure. Councilmember Nadrowski Eichner pointed out that we were using old language and we should try to conform it with the new definitions. And thank you very much. That was a very good thought. And that's what I've tried to do in this section. Councilmember McMurray raised the question. Oftentimes, we as a council do not, it's in the crease here, do not get all of the information we need to assess the cap from the Board of Ed, Norwalk Public Schools. Rather, it seems to be an edited version, abbreviated version of the budget. Is there a way to request a higher scope budget presentation that we should go through and have to decipher with the overall city budget? My response to her was, I think that these new provisions do require greater information. Now, that being said, having all their line items is informative. It's useful to know what they are, but the council, especially in Norwalk, which just really is involved in setting caps, has no role whatsoever. There's no council in the state that has any role whatsoever in the line items in the budget. So while the information is useful, and they should provide it, and it should be part of an overall budget package, you should have a sense of what the department is spending. You should be able to know that when they're coming to you with the bottom line, that what they've said in the past, that they were going to spend money on this or money on that, is true. Because very often, in my experience, it's not. But the opportunity for a council to look at that information and the Board of Estimate, as well as the mayor, is useful. So I think we do request comprehensive information. So they can't decide what information they want to provide you. Henry, the mayor, the council, the BET, all have the ability to establish procedures, and the Board of Ed is bound to follow those procedures. There's very clear case law on that issue, and I'm very confident and very comfortable that there's case law on that issue. So you're entitled to whatever information you're looking for, just to answer your question more completely. The next provision is public engagement. It basically says that all the parties to the budget, and I have the Planning and Zoning Commission in here because of the role they play on the capital side, have to really engage the public in throughout this process. And you'll see there's a number of public hearings that are required. And I see that there is another issue that was raised by Councilmember Najolski Eichner. I will take a look at that. The issue is the yellowed language that the mayor shall provide electronic access to the budget. I believe when you comply with the public notice requirements, as we state in the earlier part of the paragraph, that is true. So if that is in fact true, I just think you should make it I can fix it as a Scrivener's error if you guys are comfortable with that, or you can just make them formal recommendations. So it's marked up, it's yellow. When I send this over to you, you'll see the things that are marked up, and we can figure out what items should be substantive recommendations from the commission. And so the process starts earlier from a public perspective with an October 1st joint public hearing where the mayor, the CFO, president of the Common Council, chairs of the chairs of the council committee or committees authorized to review the budget, the chair pro tem of the Board of Ed, since the mayor is the chair of the Board of Ed, the chair of the Planning and Zoning Commission, and a member of the Board of Estimate. Is one that Nora didn't get. Designated by the mayor, would conduct kind of a initial pre-budget public hearing that gives the public an opportunity to come out and speak on any matters they think you should be thinking about as you're beginning to formulate the budget. That is a new provision. The other provision that is new is that there's a requirement, although I think you do a pretty good job with it, of providing a budget calendar. and publishing the budget calendar on no later than October 15th, so that all the departments know what their obligations are and when, and the public has a sense of what those obligations are and when. Any questions up to this point?
The only thing I'd ask, sorry, I forgot to raise my hand. The public engagement piece of this,
Yeah,
and I guess that, and also sort of the putting things on the city website. I know this is something that the IT department's working on, but a lot of times a complaint we get from the public involves people not being able to find things on the city's website. I think that this is not, I don't know if this is something that should be in the charter, but when we think about sort of what we're requiring administrations from now in the future to do, making sure that that documents like this are easily accessible, and not just say, oh, it's on the website, but actually a defined link that people know where they can go. I think it's just the absolute best way to show complete transparency. I know that the mayor's administration has been completely forthright and willing to be transparent. It's just a matter of making sure that that's actually what happens. And then there's this public engagement piece, which I don't actually know what it means, because it just says must develop and publicize procedures designed to encourage public participation. So I don't know what that means.
well, it means whatever the bodies want it to mean. It means that if the council wants to establish workshops, whatever it may be, to encourage public participation in the process, they can do so. If you think we can tighten, if there's a way to tighten it up, we can. Again,
Yeah.
it's establishing a broader constitutional standard so that the players who are subject to that can decide that they want to do things to help publicize procedures, to encourage people to come out to meetings, participate in whatever other activities there are. Let me just deal with your first question. I see that Councilmember Freyer has his hand up. If you look at the public notice definition in the early articles of this subsection 29 of article of section 2-2, it's not just website. So there is a broad public notice standard, and I would say, Councilmember Goldstein, that if you should look there. That's where we should tighten up the standard to make it clear. Is I would take a look at the definition of public notice and see if we should say something more there to give more direction on the website part of it. It's not just not relying on a website. There still is hard data, hard copies, etc. What we did do here is we moved away from newspaper notice, unless it's statutorily
that makes sense.
Yeah, unless it's statutorily required, or if you make a judgment call that you think it's necessary, you can do it, but it's not mandatory in all cases. You'll see it. You'll probably see it in the taxing district sections. We didn't mess with the taxing district section, so we didn't play around with any of that stuff at all. So I would recommend, Councilmember Goldstein, that you take a look at the notice section, and if you have any thoughts on that, either give me a buzz or bring it up.
That I'd be happy to do that. I would just note that section you referred to, the language is almost identical when discussing the website. So I figured it was worth bringing up here tonight.
No, absolutely.
But I'm happy to talk about this with you offline. That's no problem at all.
If you think it needs to be tightened, let's figure out a way to do it. That's all.
Okay.
All right. Councilmember Freyer.
Thank you. The number 3, the initial public hearings, October 1st. That seems incredibly early. I mean, you've only got maybe 5 months of actual in there.
Well, it's early, but the idea, and I've been seeing this, I was chair of the finance committee of my Board of Alders in New Haven for 8 years. And the idea of this is really a public forum to try to get a sense from the public. This is not on the budget. It's not reviewing how the money is being spent unless somebody raises a question about how it's being spent. It's an opportunity before you really start asking department heads to do certain things, is to gauge whether there's public opinion that might tell you to move in another direction, or that there's something important to the public that they want to address in the process. I think that was the intent of having this
Definitely.
hearing.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, I mean, it's just, you're almost getting to the point where you're working on and you should work on budgets year round, but I think it'd be very difficult for people operating department heads to comment intelligently on increases or decreases or
Well, it's not for the
changes to a
department heads.
budget.
This is for the members of the public.
I know, but the members of the public are telling the government
Oh.
what they want, right?
Yeah.
So you're asking the department heads that the mayor, the chief financial officer is going to go down to those department heads and say, hey, start looking at this and tell me whether this is something that's feasible or not.
Mhm.
I just think I think the timing is just a little bit premature, but I understand what you're saying. So I can't argue with the concept that we should all be thinking about where we want to spend our money and how much money we can afford to spend. And maybe from that standpoint, it might be good to get these things out in the open rather than waiting until after the budget's all done and then people complaining.
Yeah. No, I mean, look, are you going to stop people from complaining? Probably not.
No,
Is
right.
it another forum for public participation? I think that's what the commission.
Okay, I got it.
determined. Yeah. I see the president has his hand up. Mr. Ray.
Yes, thank you, Attorney Mednick. I just wanted to comment that in recent years, the council, the Finance Committee of the Common Council and the Finance Committee of the Board of Education have held early meetings at the beginning of October to discuss expectations as it relates to the ongoing budget activities. But that has been specific to just the Board of Education. And in each year of those years, it was somewhat premature for the city, on the city side, to provide any true information because we were just, through the chief financial officer, initiating the budget cycle process in terms of going out to each of the departments, conducting interviews and assessing what they have spent previously and what their expectations were going forward. But I will state again that in early October, we have held joint meetings with specifically the Board of Education, and that's primarily because they're the largest part of the budget, to understand what their expectations were going into the budget cycle.
Thank you, Mr. President. Madam Chair?
Yes, we actually spent a lot of time thinking about this particular section in order to address many of the comments that were made from the public that they didn't feel that they had input early enough, that decisions were really made and they were reacting to those decisions once the department heads had presented their budget. And one of our commitments to the citizens in Norwalk was to gain as much transparency as we possibly can in the budget process. So this was intentional on our part, and there were numerous people, and a lot of the comments were relative to energy considerations going forward with the city, that kind of thing. But it was something that we felt would be a plus for the city.
The other thing I want to point out as we're going through this, Henry spent a lot of time. This was the first major section. I see the mayor has his hand up. The first, Patsy can confirm this, the first major section that we tackled back in November, December, January.
Yeah.
And we had a lot of Henry's time in a pre-budget period. We lost Henry once the budget started, but Henry was very active. All of the dates that we have in this charter, in this proposal, were worked through with Henry. So I just want to let everybody know that the Charter Commission just didn't create the dates that are in here. We worked very closely with the CFO. Mayor?
Thank you. Yes, I agree with this provision. I think it's critically important that we let the public know that the budget process is coming and they can comment on any thoughts and ideas that they might have. And department heads can take that information and take their lead from it. So the department head may be asking for one thing and the public says, well, you know, this is also important. And then, because what happens now is the department head puts together their budget, comes to the BET, and by that time, you know, the public comment, it's really pretty much a fait accompli. Now, I think if the public can make some comments ahead of time, give us an idea, like you said, solar or some other resiliency, some other coastal resiliency, those kinds of things that people might say, you should really take a look at this. So
Exactly.
I think that's important.
Thank you, Mayor. So just moving on, we kind of walked through what we tried to do in the charter is to kind of a linear process laid out where we start with the estimates at the beginning of the budget process. Councilmember Najolski-Eichner had a question, and I'm more than happy to be guided by the council on this. And maybe we don't have to state it every time we make the reference, but it's very important. And again, this may be part of the legacy of dealing with boards of ed throughout the state, but it's very important to just underscore that the Board of Ed has to comply with every element of the budget process as every other department. We call them really budgeted entities, and the Board of Ed and the Norwalk Public Schools are that. I tend to, in charters, to delineate both the governing body, the Board of Ed. Sometimes the whole system is called the Board of Ed, the Department of Ed. Sometimes they don't like to be called departments, but they are a department. And I believe you call them the Norwalk Public Schools. That's why we do that. You'll see that repeated throughout. If it concerns you, we could just probably define it in one place so we don't have to. I think that's maybe what Councilmember Najolski-Eichner was getting at, and I'm more than happy to recommend, or if you recommend that to the commission, I'm sure they'll be more than happy to comply. The intent was not to, take not to make 1,000 cuts, but just to make a point is, I think, the important issue here. And so, did I see a hand? I don't. Patsy, do you have your hand up, Madam Chair?
No,
Okay.
I don't.
All right.
It's my cove lighting
I didn't want to ignore you.
in the background.
Yep, so 10-2 is the estimate section. Really nothing new in here except, some terminology. Then we get to the mayor's proposed budget. Council member Najolski, there's a date for the submission on or before February 15th. The council member raised the issue whether it should be at a meeting of the council. And I just didn't know whether that was logistically necessary. I did not make that change as an editorial change. It sounds like a pretty substantive question. So maybe I'll defer to the council member, see if she has any thoughts on why it should be at a meeting as opposed to just a fixed date.
No, I really was responding to the language. So the Board of Estimate, so the submission is supposed to go to the Board of Estimate and Taxation at a meeting. And then it says to the council on or before, so there's no specification there. So I didn't know if there is.
Okay, I see your point. There's no symmetry. You're right.
Right.
It's a symmetrical question. And I don't know what you guys think. I mean, if you want to have it at a meeting, I hadn't thought about that.
Well, and in general, as a practical matter, I think we typically get the budget the same time the BET does. I mean, once the mayor releases it, he releases it, correct? So I was a little uncertain as to the multiple dates here as well.
Because it's not formally presented. It's not formally presented to the Common Council until after it's formally presented and voted on by the Board of Estimate. I think that's the way it works.
I think that's the lag.
Okay.
But it should either be at a meeting of the Board of Estimate and Taxation and then at a meeting of the Common Council, or delete the at a meeting of the Board of Estimate, because there is no symmetry, and I think that's the issue. Right?
Yeah.
So it's either one or it's either you do both or you don't do any because it stands. to
So
reason
just take this out or put meetings for both.
Yeah, which and if you're redundant,
I'm not sure.
it'd be like too wordy to do both, so you might as well just take it out because it goes without saying. It would seem.
Yeah. Yeah. I would
Everybody
take it
okay
out.
with that? All right, let me, actually, this is my marked up copy. I gotta be careful. I will mark this for deletion on my baseline document. I've got to keep everything straight here. I wanted to show you the changes. So we'll just take care of this. Delete, whoops. Oh, I just pushed. Thank you. Very useful. Hopefully this won't take too much longer. I just want to make sure that we cover everything. So we got that taken care of. Again, talks about the narratives and recommendations that are in the budget. Again, we went over all this with Henry. He felt comfortable with it. This is the section B, where we talk about line item requests and narratives proposed by all budget entities, including the Board of Ed. I think this covers that issue that Councilmember McMurray raised earlier, so that this requires all that data that she was looking for. So I think that's how that is addressed in the charter. Then you have the review by the Board of Estimate. We had the word taxation repeated twice here. And the next issue is another issue that was raised by council member. There's two of them right here. This is. Do you want to explain this, Councilmember Najolski Eichner, what your concern was?
Sure. So I guess it's a little bit, again, I think it's as much as anything, just sort of a trying to wording and figure this out correctly. This seems like a description of the Board of Estimate and Taxation's sort of large powers, right? Like the power to levy taxes and the fiscal year. This seems like a description of what they do in general. It doesn't necessarily seem to me that specifically belongs in this moment in the sequence. If that makes sense, like this is not describing what they're doing at this moment in time in response to what they've just received from the mayor. So I feel like this whole section either needs to be someplace earlier on.
You're saying, okay.
Yeah, do you see what I'm saying? So it just seemed a little bit out of step with this. You're very thoughtful sequencing. The rest of this is a beautiful sequencing of like step by step what's happening. That's all I was trying to
Do the former members of the Board of Estimate agree with that?
What we're referring to, I'm not following.
10-4. Here, let me go up this section.
Okay.
Because it seems to be more, she may be right, that these are, you were addressing powers to establish the mill rate. Maybe it should be in an introductory section of the budget section or in the Board of Finance powers and authority.
Right.
But the furnishing of information, I guess, is year round. Am I correct on that? That you're always.
Yeah.
So
that's what we were just talking about earlier, right? Is the Board of Estimate and Taxation gets information, whenever they need it from the, through the CFO, but it's, the department says you're required to provide it. So these both feel much more general to me.
Yeah, rely on the mayor and the members of the former members of the Board of Estimate to give their thoughts on this.
I think that this is, correct me if I'm wrong, Ed, but I mean, this is basically what we do, but there are iterations of it. I think this is a kind of a generic explanation of what the Board of Estimate would do.
So she's right that maybe we should move this into the section of the charter where the powers of the Board of Estimate are generally discussed.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that could make sense. Yes.
All right. Good catch.
And it could very well be that once it's moved into that section, could also, it could very well be that it's redundant. I'm not sure what's in that section.
Yeah, no, yeah. Not the BOT, the BET. Okay. I will take a look, because what I'm going to try to do after this meeting tonight, not tonight, I will not do it, but tomorrow morning, is I will try to get to Zuma the markup based on these discussions. These are not formal changes, but these are the discussion points that we've had to get this published, because if we're doing, I'll talk before we leave. I think we had a tentative schedule for a public hearing on Monday, Mr. President, so I don't know if it's been noticed, but if there's going to be a public hearing, we should probably have something published tomorrow. And I'll make sure we get an update of the document with all the questions. If the council members don't mind, I will include their questions in the side panel to let the public know that this document has been run through very substantially by the members of the council. But we'll talk about the public hearing before we close out tonight.
And Steve, just real quick, I had another question on 10.5.
Yes.
So it was really, yeah. So I'm also a little confused about how 10.5 operates with 10.3, because so is this 10.5 just requiring that what happens in 10.3 with the mayor providing the budget to the BET and the council then also get published subsequent to that or before that? Like 5 days before the fourth Monday of February is basically the 22nd of February, I think, most of the time, or somewhere around there. So is this something separate? Is this just saying that when the mayor gives it to the council, it also needs to be publicly noticed?
This is current language, and I have to tell you, I don't know the answer.
Okay.
I thought I had the same level of confusion. I broke it out because I was, and I never got an answer from our CFO on this
Okay.
In terms of distinguishing it. So it was dangling here. So
That makes, yeah, I get that. And I think as a practical matter, it basically means there has to be public notice at the same time it goes to the council. And I think we do that. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Mayor, but I think once it goes to the BET, really, there's, it's published.
It's
So-
kind of interesting that they say the fourth Monday of February of each year, 5 days before that. In the next line, it gives a date specific. So
Exactly.
perhaps a date specific in 10.5 would be a little clearer, and everybody would know exactly what that is.
Yes, completely. And we obviously want it published before. I mean, yeah, so I think I agree with you, Mayor. I think that would be helpful.
who should I talk to about a date? Henry?
I think Henry would be the best person.
Yeah.
And
Madam Chair?
yeah, can we go back up to 10.3B, the opening line with the parentheses around including the Board of Education? Can we eliminate the parentheses? It just sort of is a little extra that could be an issue, become an issue.
So do what? Have commas? and
Well,
take-
we had a lot of discussion about the Board of Education being a department of the city, obviously, which we know, but is argued at times. And so if we want to keep the language, including the Board of Education, can we just get rid of the parentheses? It makes it a less less notice on it.
All right.
Not as it's more subtle, is what I'm trying to say.
All right.
And we did have a lot of discussion on that concept, so that's why I'm bringing it up.
Whoops. Okay. I'm sorry for doing that, but I'm trying to, I can't, I
Yeah,
gotta be careful about marking up this document and thinking it's
Right.
done, all right, let's move on. Whoops. So then we go to, and this is an interesting question because I think, again, some questions came up. By the way, Mr. President, we still need to figure out all of these voting standards. So sometime before you act on it, later in a couple of weeks, I think the 19th is the tentative date. We need to make sure that you're comfortable, that the members are comfortable with the standard. So I ask every member to take a look and make sure I highlighted all the standards. We have a defined term for what a majority vote is. And so the question becomes, if you want an alternative to what a majority vote is, the defined term, let me know where those are. So I'll apply the term where it should be applied and apply the alternate where it should be applied. So that's why throughout this document, you'll see the yellow markings on the affirmative vote of a majority, 2/3, whatever the standard is marked. I'm sure that that you guys have an opportunity. It's a rare opportunity to really have some discussion about the standard that's set in the charter for the votes that you take.
Yeah.
Yep. Question?
So at some point, so the distinction is the majority of the common council present and voting, or of the absolute number of
Let me see-
the members
let
of
me
the
see
common
how-
council?
Yeah, let me see how it's defined. I'm working on 3 charters. I apologize. Majority of vote of the council is defined as the affirmative vote of at least a majority of the members of the council present and voting. So it's a pretty
Yeah.
loosey-goosey standard. So it's a present and voting standard. So if you want it to be entire membership, keep it. If you want it to be the defined term, we need to know. That's all I'm saying, is that we have the defined term, and so you need to look at these things and decide. Now, this is a
Yeah.
pretty important matter. Your maximum limit on the total appropriation, and so you may want to have a higher standard on it. So I don't know, but that's your call. And I just wanted to make sure that
I think it might present a problem if some council member was in the hospital or not unable to vote or something of that nature, and therefore we couldn't have a vote on it because we don't have the entire council there.
yeah,
Yeah,
no, I agree.
The problem,
I mean, if you say something like a minimum of 2/3 of the council or something of that nature, I think it's safe. But and again, the entire membership of the council present and voting could mean 8 people as well, which might not be enough.
right?
That's the problem with that, and that's why on important matters like this, you want to have some higher standard. So but that's why I highlighted it. So we did not make a judgment. The commission did not make a judgment. We thought since it was going to the council, that we'd give the council full ability to address the issue. So
Well, on one issue and a vote, it's a supermajority plus 1, which be 11. I don't know if people would feel comfortable with that, because that could mean, for whatever reason, there could be 4 people absent and not voting, but that's not very likely either.
But let's consider the last time that we had a vote on the budget, on the cap. It was what, an 8-6 vote or something like that. So that was the entire. So that was a supermajority.
Yeah, the entire council was there for that. Yes.
The overall numbers, but it was a very.
I just think you put a very strong restriction, if you will, on the fact that it has to be the entire council membership, because we don't know what, if anything, could happen to render that not doable.
Oh, Mayor, I did not propose the current charter.
Right.
That's why I highlighted it, because I think you need to look at these things. So I think the points you're making are all quite valid. I didn't want you to think that either I recommended this or the commission recommended it.
Right. It's in the
It is
current charter.
Yeah. So that's why I thought it was important, since we're defining the term, to really come to grips with every decision as a charter-based decision, so that you can decide what you want to do. So all I'm saying is that I don't know how the president wants to do this, but there should be some discussion. Somebody needs to go through the document and figure that out and lead the charge, so that we can fix it by the time you send this back to the commission in a couple of weeks. All right. Sorry to be redundant, but I just want to make sure it gets done. Councilmember McMurr had a question on this section. Let me see if I can read it better on the screen. I am not suggesting we do this now. Okay. Discuss how the budget relating to okay. This was her broader question, and I think this is probably one of the issues you'll look at within the next 2 years, is what is the respective role of the council versus the BET? So I think she just wanted to raise it to kind of earmark it for further discussion. I don't think there was a need to answer that at this moment. So again, Councilmember Najolski Eichner raised the question about the clause. Let's see if I can get the whole thing on the screen at one time. Yeah, here it is. I think it's all here now. She was concerned about the as set forth in the mayor's proposed budget and whether or not that impacts on the ability of the council to amend the limit proposed by the mayor. And my response to her on this document, she has not heard the response until now. I apologize, Nora. Is what is the current? I don't know. It's the current language. What is the current practice? Does the council have the ability to raise the limit at the present time? I don't know the answer to that. It's
We do.
never been. You do.
Yeah, we do.
And does anybody think that this language limits it? The as set forth. The way I looked at the language was it was simply saying the mayor is setting it forth in his proposed budget. You have the ability to act on it. So if there's clearer language, I'm more than happy. This is not my document. This is yours in the end. More than happy to modify it if somebody has any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, I can follow up with you, but we definitely, there's plenty of language in here, right, about amending and, amending, modifying, increasing, decreasing. Like, I think something
Right.
that's a little clearer, that we're not just, voting on
We'll talk
So
about
I'll
that
follow up with you on
offline. All right, great, super. And it'll obviously be reported to everybody on the council. And if everybody agrees on that. So I think again, no significant changes here. But so the next question that Councilmember Najolski Eichner raised was whether the BET can raise the maximum limit
The answer is
set by
yes.
the council.
The answer is yes. But
I think the
that
answer is yes.
requires-
Yeah.
but that requires a 2/3 vote of the common council.
Of the common council?
For the budget, once the BET.
Oh, that's coming up. But this is of the Board of Estimate.
Yeah, Board of Estimate can increase what the common council has voted on, but that then has to go back to the common council for a 2/3 vote of the common council to approve that suggested increase.
All right. Nora, are you comfortable with that answer?
I think that's fine. I just wanted to be clear. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that it was clear that they could not just make alterations within the cap, but also raise the cap. Do you see where there's like
Yeah.
slightly two different potential ways that could be interpreted? And I'm just thinking it might be
Well,
best to have
once
it
you add the
clear.
cap, I mean, in there, including,
But that's the maximum limit of total appropriations. That's the cap.
yeah. that
Right,
is
so
a-
what I'm saying
yeah.
is what it says, they can make alterations to the mayor's proposed operating budget, but I think then they may also need to be able to make alterations, increases and decreases to the mayor's proposed operating budget and the
Right.
maximum limit.
Because that's what you do. If I put in a budget and it's X number of millions of dollars, the the common council sets
The cap.
the cap that they're comfortable with. It could be higher, could be lower. And also I noticed that it does have on section B here, 10.8B, affirmative vote of 2/3 of the entire council membership. So I don't know if the 2/3 vote for the other part would be consistent or if it's different.
Well, I think, I assume that 2/3 vote meant because in terms of the timing, once it goes, so after the BET gets it, then it goes to the board, to the common council again. And if the Board of Estimate does not recommend a number over the cap, then that's the end of it. there's no action by the Common Council, but if the Board of Estimate comes in over the cap, then the Common Council can reject it by not approving it by 2/3 vote of the Common Council.
Right. Well, but I was saying, I thought I was saying that the initial vote was the entire membership of the council. And that is also setting the cap. This
Right.
is amending the cap and it's 2/3.
Of the
So
entire
it's almost
membership.
like the 2/3 vote could overrule the entire council's vote if we
Yeah,
had.
but 2/3 vote only occurs if I mean, in practice, I'm not sure that the wording is consistent, but in practice, it only occurs or is necessary if the BET comes back to the Common Council with a number greater than the cap that the Common Council had originally approved.
Yeah, that should probably be made clear in there then,
Well,
because
Yeah.
Go ahead, Dora.
no, I was just because I think there's two separate issues here, Mayor. I think you're raising the very important question about this whole entire membership of the council versus present and voting, which I agree with you on. I think present and voting is probably better just because otherwise you run the risk of, someone being, but I think
Rendering
that,
inactive. Yeah.
right, exactly. So I tend to agree with that. I actually disagree with Ed on his other point though, or this point about, I think that I personally feel strongly that the council should be able to raise the limit or decrease the limit, whatever the BET does. I think the council should by 2/3 vote be able to raise or decrease. I don't see any reason to limit the council's authority here. And I think the point of having it be 2/3 is that it's like a veto override, right? In the same way that in order to override the mayor's veto of an ordinance, we need 2/3.
Right.
This is a similar kind of thing. We would be overriding the board of the BET. It should take 2/3, but we should have the authority to do it in either direction.
So in other words, if the BET comes in under the cap, it should, the Common Council, because the cap, after all, is the maximum amount. Right? The BET then decides how much is going to be spent. So if the BET decides that we're going to spend $1 million less, then that's the end of it, right? The Common Council can't, no, you're going to spend $1 million more because the BET decides what's spent. The board, the Common Council decides what the cap shall be, what the maximum amount shall be. So so if the BET then says 1 million less, it's kind of superfluous for the Common Council to say, no, we want 1 million more because that's never going to happen. The BET sets how much is going to actually be spent.
But what I'm saying is, Ed, is that I think that that's not correct. I think that if the council by 2/3 says, no, actually, we want that additional $1 million spent, then it is directing that the limit is that. And if you look at 10.9, it actually allows for the BET to then have to adjust to whatever that final number the council puts forward is, which would presumably include the requirement then that it has to spend more to get to the council.
That defeats the purpose of having a BET. Because what you're saying is that it doesn't matter what the BET says. It's up to the Common Council. Why have a BET at that point?
Well, because the BET is still doing all the line items. The council can't direct the line items.
Well,
but
the BET is doing more than the line items. The BET is setting the tax rate, is setting the mill rate. But that's what the BET is doing. So it's not just a question of math. Because if it was just a question of math, you wouldn't need a BET. You would just need the finance department to figure out what the math was based on the, on the mills, so what you're suggesting is basically rendering the BET really superfluous in the process. And the Common Council sets the maximum amount that will be appropriated. The BET that does the fine tuning and says, we don't think that's enough, but we can't say so because we don't set the cap. It's going to go back to the Common Council to set the cap. We're going to suggest $1 million or $2 million more than the Common Council has set. Now it's up to you to decide if that's what you want to do or not. But if we come in under the cap, we've decided that this is how much of what you say the most we can spend is. We're spending $1 million less. If the Common Council can go back and say, no, it's $1 million more. How does that work? It's because the BET sets how much will actually be spent.
Right.
Yeah, and that's not the way we do it now. That's not 10.9A is not the way we do it now. It's a pretty major change.
Well, I don't think we're changing anything, Mayor. I think this is the language. I don't think we changed this. Let me take a look.
Really?
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah,
I mean, this is, and just Mayor, so you know, this is the whole
language. This is the current
conversation. that-
language. Yeah.
This is the conversation I had with the Corporation Counsel's office during this budget season. This is how this is the current language. It's broken up differently. It's rearranged. But, and I mean, Darren Callahan agreed with me that actually what the charter language says actually is to allow the council to increase or decrease, and the BET has to adjust.
But the BET is not going to direct a department to spend $1 million more than they want, than they need to, because the BET is the financial watchdog of the city. It's like, so what you're saying is that we're going to direct a department to spend $1 million more or whatever over the course of all the departments, $1 million or $2 million more than what the financial arm of the city says is appropriate, is
Yes.
financially feasible, is, whatever. There would be no point in having a BET at that point.
I mean, but Ed, I think that the part of the point of this, right, is that at the end of the day, budgets are decisions on what the constituency wants spent, right? And if we as the council are saying that based on what we're hearing from our constituents, we believe that the BET has underfunded a department. We believe that the department actually needs more money to accomplish the task that the constituency wants to be completed. That is a valid, I mean, that is a really important form of,
But then what you're saying
consumer
is that
or
we don't need-
constituent input.
but then what you're saying is that we don't need a BET.
I mean, that is a structural question, I think, that, goes beyond what we're doing here, because the BET is still obviously performing an enormously important function in doing the review and coming to the conclusions. I mean, that's why it would require a 2/3
That's
vote,
not really
like
the
a veto
function.
of an ordinance, right? Or a veto override. It's the same idea. The BET has done the review. If the council by a supermajority, however, thinks it should be differently, that's different than the original majority vote, right?
Well,
That's
it's
why
because
there's a
of-
difference in the number of votes.
What you're saying is that the common council should set the taxes, should set the mill rate, should basically tell the city of Norwalk how much taxes the residents of the city of Norwalk, how much taxes they're gonna pay. That used to be, or is currently, the function of the BET. And so it's, in some ways, look, the common council and the BET work well together in this regard. The BET is less guided by politics and more by sort of fiscal issues. And the common council, by definition, is a political body. And so they work well together. But I think that if you're going to sort of basically strip the BET of any of its current authority to be the fiscal watchdog for the city, then there's no need to have the BET.
And,
I mean,
and
I will
just
just-
as
Yeah, I'll just say that this is the current language, whether it's been interpreted
Yeah.
differently in the past, this is
I
the current
agree
language.
with that. Yes, the
well,
language.
that then gives the common council line item control on the budget.
Well, it
Because
does,
they
because
can-
the
Not
whole
really.
idea is that the BET.
No, you can
Not
say
line-
add,
not
was
line
doing.
item.
add X number of dollars to police vehicles,
Yeah.
add X number of dollars to the fire department equipment, add X number of dollars to something to do with the DP Parks and Recreation. You can add those line items based on what that language says.
Yeah, let me just jump in there, because I mean, I spent quite a bit of time on the budget this past year. What Ed is saying is absolutely right. What we and the BET did would look line by line by line at specific expenditures that were made. And there are ups and downs, ups and downs. I can't imagine that the Common Council would have the time to do the same thing that we did in the detail that we had to go through. And you only have a short period of time to do it. You only have a month or two to do all of that. It's impossible. It's an impossible task to do. On the other hand, too, it's a necessary check and balance that and which the BET is filled with financial experts that do budgeting. For example, my experience is working on an $8 million budget, an $8 billion budget every year, and knowing how to go in and look at that and make decisions. I can't imagine that the Common Council could, would have the time, the wherewithal to go through and do it the same level that we would have done or did do, I'm sorry. And by your suggestion, Nora, it really is just to get rid of the Board of Estimate in all shape or form. It would serve no useful purpose at all.
But I think to her point though, the language of the charter as currently written, leaves an open question as to whether or not the practice has actually been true to the language of the charter. I've had conversations with Alicia King about this, and I think she was able to find out or cobble together pieces of the charter that made it clear why this language has been interpreted the way it's been interpreted. I just can't remember that off the top of my head, but I think it's in an email that she sent me at some point when I was chair of the BET, which if I find, I will circulate. But admittedly, the language is unclear, at least if we're just looking at this section of the chart.
I think the chairperson might be able to clear it up or something, Ms. Brescia.
I'm just doing, I'm picking up some what?
No,
Yeah, she's right here.
yeah, I
She's coming off right now.
Somebody get over here.
Hello?
I think so.
Okay, but just wait right here then.
Who's ever at 5675, we're hearing some background information. Could you mute, please?
There we go.
There you go.
Patsy, were you going to say something?
no, I didn't.
Oh, okay. And I apologize. I thought the debate was really useful, so I wasn't interrupting. I'm sorry I didn't recognize you. One of the council members had his hand up for a while, but I thought that it was a useful debate. So you need to think about this. We have to, because this is current language. And so I don't think we made any changes here, Patsy. Correct me if I'm wrong on any of the procedural issues. So it was simply a matter of breaking it down. And that's what we found in a couple of other areas in the charter, things that we didn't know existed. And so you may want to look at this or save the debate for 2 years from now, I guess.
Yeah, practice almost became policy.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
what happens with this, as we said, the last fiscal year, or for this coming year, the council added $1 million to the budget. They did not allocate or indicate where that would be allocated. And the Board of Estimate and Taxation did not amend or adjust the budget to include that extra $1 million.
Oh, they did not.
Okay.
No.
But
that's right.
again,
That's
Steve,
right.
just to clarify though, we added that before it went to the Board of Estimate and Taxation.
Yeah,
The
it came
Board of
back
Estimate
and
and
we didn't.
Taxation did not, so the Board of Estimate and Taxation appropriated at $1 million below what the council had set the
Right.
maximum limit at.
And have
We
they-
did not do a 2/3 vote to override that.
No.
Okay.
And no
But-
one, and there was no attempt to do so, so there was no precedent as to whether, but that was a conversation to be had, and there was some back and forth.
So you did not challenge, you made a decision not to challenge, basically, is what it came down to.
Correct, yes,
All right.
so, but to Ed's point, I also had this conversation with Alicia. Her interpretation of the language around what the Board of Estimate and Taxation then had to do so if the council had voted for at 2/3 to override and increase the limit, she was of the belief that the Board of Estimate and Taxation could then once again not spend that money in their final budget. I disagree with that because, and when you read the language here, I don't think that's a correct interpretation of that language, but that was her interpretation and why she felt that at the end of the day, it still was finally with the Board of Estimate and Taxation. So
But
that's where
Nora,
some of that back and forth was at.
But Nora, would you say that the council then can tell which line item that money goes into and you have
Nope.
line item control in the budget?
No, but it says that the council can set the maximum limit.
Okay.
So the override vote would be to override the maximum limit, and the BET would then have to decide what to do with that additional money.
But Nora, what
But
happens
then-
then? So what you're doing is you're adding $1 million to the taxpayer bill. So that means that you're gonna, the BET would then have to go back, set the mill rate, so they would collect an extra $1 million that the BET believes would not be spent. You know, unless you put it in a specific line, it's not going to be spent. Who's going to spend it?
Well, I think that's exactly the point, is that if the council, presumably if the council is directing the BET that we think an additional $1 million should be spent, we have trust that the BET should figure out where that $1 million would be most useful. I think
But
that
they've
would
already-
be the idea.
But they've
they-
already found out that it's not,
Go
that
ahead.
so because they've come in under the cap.
They have already decided that you don't need that $1 million.
And I
Based
I
on
think that it would be, I would presume it would be taken in the same way that generally a veto override is taken, right? If the council passes something, the mayor vetoes it, the council then overrides that veto, there's a clear message being sent, and the presumption is that the message is conveyed that the weight of public opinion is requesting that something be done, right?
I understand that, but where do you spend the money? Who's going to get the money?
Yeah, who's going to spend it?
Well, again, I would have faith in the Board of Estimate and Taxation to figure out what would be most usefully done with that money. I mean, again, I don't think it's typically unclear in the actual public debate, right? Typically, the actual public debate is providing a very clear indicator of what the public intent is and what the BET is being asked to use that money for. But under the current charter, we couldn't direct it. It would be up to the BET.
But there's so much mischief associated with that. The BET could put it all in the mayor's office, and the mayor cannot spend it.
Sure. I mean, but that's true of all of this, right? I mean,
No,
in
no,
gen-
No,
that-
no, wait. I
No,
think
but
you're missing a
under the
big point.
current setup, because the council could set a cap, and the BET could assign, $300 million to the mayor's office. There's absolutely nothing in
Well,
the
but
current
that's
charter
not-
that prevents that.
No.
The point is that the BET has already decided how the money, that we don't need $1 million, so we've gone under the cap. So that's in good faith.
But if the council thinks that the BET is incorrect in their decisions, the council should have a way of conveying that information.
That's fine, but the
But
BET's
where?
decided that. So they're going to put the $1 million in the mayor's office is not going to get spent.
And
I mean,
the taxpayers have just had to
And
pay
the
$1 million
taxpayers
more
are
than
paying more-
they had to.
More taxes.
And I would think that the BET probably wouldn't make the decision that way, but I don't know. I mean, again, this is not there's a whole debate to be had in 2 years as to how we should do this. And I have strong feelings about that. What I was really trying to draw attention to here is what the actual language says, because what we want clarity on that. And the whole point of this exercise is to have clarity. So I don't want us to finish this round, this year one vision of it, and still not have clarity on what the authority is or is not. That's really what I'm trying to say here, is that the whole point of this exercise is to have clarity. And at the moment, this is not clear.
That's
No, I
true.
agree with Nora on that. The issue here is, from my perspective, you have 15 council people, and each one of them represents a district or a constituency. And therefore, that's when you can start getting, well, I need $500,000 for this, I need 100,000 for that, almost like pork barrel politics, where you put something in because
Right.
you want something for this group or you want something for that group. And I think that's why the Board of Estimate and Taxation has been given, whether or not within the charter, the ability to set the cap, not set the cap, but to either come in at the cap or under the cap, based on what they find the needs of the individual departments were. So I'm surprised to see this in there, but Nora, you're absolutely correct. This is the language, and we need to figure that out.
I just want to report that this particular issue did not really come up at all in our review, but the issue regarding the Board of Estimate and Taxation that did come up from several people is the desire to have it be an elected office and not appointed. And so we were, as you know, charged not to make any major changes and to the charter, and we considered that potential to be a major change. So we did not recommend anything in that direction.
So, look, I think it's a really robust debate. I think you guys need to figure out, again, we did not change any of this language, so we need to figure out
Yeah.
how we're going to proceed in the next couple of weeks. So So we should probably talk about that, continue that debate and that discussion. I do have a question, and I came across this in your neighboring town, because I will point out for the record that the only two big cities in the state that have these types of systems are Stamford and Norwalk. You have an elected Board of Finance in Stamford, and the appointed BET in Norwalk. We actually used to have a board of finance that was appointed in New Haven that went away in 1990 or 1991, and since then the legislative bodies had all the fiscal authority, and that is generally the case in most of our cities. But on the mill rate question, I've always viewed the mill rate as kind of a ministerial act. But it seems here from this language, where is it here? What did I do with it? Final actions here. Okay, notice of publication. Yeah, here it is. In subsection C, it sounds like after the budget is set, the cap is set, the lines are set, the Board of Estimate and Taxation has the ability to make further alterations in the estimates, appropriations, and tax rates as it shall deem proper, and then it fixes, then it sets the mill rate after that. And then no appropriation under C requires any further action by the council. What does the Board of Estimate actually modify any further under subsection C? Again, that's current language. In Stamford, they do. A lot of people didn't understand this, but when I pulled the language, I did a restructuring of their finance section. I think the Board of Finance is a little upset that I discovered this, but it turned out the Board of Finance there has the ability, after the budget is set, after the Board of Reps in that town, their city council votes on it, they can do some contingencies, they can do some other things that were not part of the budget process, and then they set the mill rate, because I was trying to figure out why the mill rate wasn't set by the legislative body, which has the last say in that town. It's a little different, but they have the last say, and I didn't understand why the mill rate was not set by the legislative body. What happens here when the mill rate, before the mill rate is set? Are there additional budget actions taken by the
to the extent that the Common Council sets the maximum allowable expenditure, sets the cap, the Board of Estimate can do anything under that cap. It's only when they exceed the cap that they have to go back, that they have to go back to the Common Council. So if they want to go into the fund balance to take an extra $1 million, that's increasing the budget by $1 million, even though it's not necessarily going to increase the taxes by $1 million. You know, it's not going to affect how much needs to be collected. But so even if to the extent that they increase the budget, they have to go back to the Common Council. But if they come in under the budget, because the Common Council set the maximum allowable expenditure, the BET can tinker under that and come up with a mill rate.
All right, so it's not a ministerial act. They do have discretion. They can increase up to the cap, and so that takes into account that language. All right, I just wanted to get an understanding. The Councilmember McMurray raised question in subsection D, no further action by the council. See, we mentioned the budget only comes back to the council if the cap is increased, but can we move this up or down or make it more clear? I think we just had that discussion. The next issue, these are pretty standard provisions. Appropriations shall not exceed the estimate of revenues. A couple of typos. Again, we need an answer. We need to have a standard set here. Then we get to the special appropriations section. One of the things we didn't tackle, I'll defer again to the chair or other members of the commission, largely because we lost Henry to the budget process, is I was hoping we would be able to address issues of transfers and other kinds of things in the charter, but that'll be for another day. But here we have special appropriations, and I guess Attorney McMuller raised the question, of McMurr. I spelled her name differently here, sorry. About the 2-year review, so I'm not sure that raises any additional issues, but I thought that there was another question, special appropriations, hang on.
Oh, I had a very, very, well, it's potentially.
Oh, the 90 versus 30?
Yeah. Because you have 90, you have 90 in the first sentence and then 30 in the second.
Yep. I don't think we made that change, so I mean, I have any appropriations shall expended for any purpose of unexpended shall be transferred into the trade 9 days after the expiration. All appropriations shall remain on the books to the credit
Yeah.
which they're 30 days after expiration. Yeah, I don't know if there's a distinction. I don't know if that again is current language. I don't know if there's a rationale for that. I will talk to Henry about that.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I just would want to double check. It would seem that we might need more than 30 days to close out the fiscal year. and
I would think so
money's
too.
has to
90
sit there for
days.
90.
Yeah, no, I agree. I will mark that as a Henry issue. Okay, and then we move to capital budget. Now, your charter has been silent on, for the most part, on the capital budget. And what we did is we went and took your capital budget ordinance and constitutionalized it, basically to set it up. New Haven did this in the 1990s. And other cities have followed suit to treat the capital budget in the same way as the general fund budget. And most of the big cities do have this. Smaller towns create waterfall type capital budgets. I'm sorry, Mayor, you had your hand up?
Yeah, just quickly, because I wanted to go back to the whole thing, and I apologize. Want to go back to the council versus the BET. I think that's something we really need to take a hard look at. As I mentioned earlier, with the council, they set the cap, and then the Board of Estimate and Taxation comes back and indicates, okay, here's the money we're spending less than the cap, we're spending more than a cap. With 15 different council people, all representing, well, 10 of them representing different districts and 5 representing the entire city, that lends to the possibility of just everybody wanting to add something to a specific line. And, you know, the sublime or the ridiculousness, it could get up to, you know, another $5 or $10 million added to the budget of people wanting to add different line items because of the constituency that they've been talking to. I just think we need to really look at that very carefully.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I think we need to work on clarification, make sure that everybody understands what's in the charter and how that should be worked on. So we should look at that carefully in the next couple of weeks. So again, on the capital budget, the was to bring it into the process. Again, Councilmember Najolski Eichner raised a question in Part A to make sure it's consistent with the public notice provisions. I will take a look at that. She also raised the question in B, whether the capital projects program that's set forth here should be a defined term. Now, we do have a defined term, and maybe we have to go back and look at this again, called capital budget items. So I guess that's different. So, yeah, so I don't have an issue if everybody kind of agrees. We could probably move that to the beginning of the document as a defined term. The other side of the coin is it's only in this section that it's referred to. We could leave it either way. I tend to like to have all the definitions and not my definitions, all the definitions in one area. But you know, I can be swayed either way. So if that's the wish, I'll be more than happy to move it to the definition section. Does anybody have any thoughts on that?
Yeah. I think clarity on it is important. So if we didn't define it as a definition, I think we should. And on this this was really, we felt very important to include and spent a lot of time on this section addressing public concern that, you know, that it's not in the charter and, you know, it is an ordinance, but hard to find. And so bringing it into the charter, we felt was extremely important to do. The whole capital budget piece. I'm not specifically talking to any one section.
So is there any objection or any concern about moving it to the definition section? So if there's consensus, I'll just do that as
Well, wait, Steve, are you saying moving it? I thought we were going to just add in the definition of the 5-year proposed 5-year program. Not to move this section, but to define the
it is
term.
defined. The 5-year program is well, is it? Hold on.
I thought we had done
Yeah,
that. That's
the 5-year program capital expenditures is defined. This is
okay.
Yeah, must be. Yeah, this is in conflict with that definition. What we may want to do is use that definition here. Yeah.
Yeah, have the language consistent.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, I'll fix that. All right, thank you, Patsy, for.
I'm gonna make myself a little badge that says consistency. I feel like that's my.
That's your prerogative.
I feel like poor Steve got so many comments from me that's like consistent on this, consistent on that. I'm
Yeah.
gonna obsess about your Oxford commas and consistency. Sorry, Steve.
Well, he's heard it from me too, so
No, I
don't
very
feel
much
bad.
appreciate his
No,
all
this
the
is-
work you all did on this.
No, ultimately, look, I take great pride in the work we do, and I do, and but this is your project. It's I'm your hairstylist. I'm trying to make you all look real good.
And
So
you've done a
let's-
glorious job. It is
Okay.
gloriously beautiful.
Thank you. All right, so I'll fix that. Thank you, Patsy, for reminding me on that definition. Public hearings, so what is Councilmember McMurray? Same here. I think more responsibility should fall with the council than does an appointed commission. These positions should be elected. I don't know what that means, to be honest with you. This is the the planning and zoning. Oh, I see what you're saying. Traditionally, planning and zoning commissions play a role in the capital budget. That's not an unusual provision. New Haven, that's not the case. I don't think it is in Hartford, but I think Bridgeport, Stamford, Norwalk, Danbury, Waterbury, I think they do. So it's not an unusual position. And it seems to me, not to stifle anybody from discussing it, that it's more of a structural reform that you might want to look at as you look forward to a revision in the next 2 years. Any other substantive changes? I mean, basically, we took the and again, I will fix all that capital projects program that I fixed from Councilmember Najolski Eichner's comments and use the defined term that we came up with at the beginning of the document. We do use the POCD. It just seems to me, I just noticed this myself, that it's defined below. I want to make sure that we use it properly. But no substantive, we didn't make any changes to the, okay, here's a big substantive question, I guess. We didn't make any changes to your current standard, but Councilmember Najolski Eichner has a question, can it amend? So the capital budget goes to the Board of Estimate. The board is then required to approve the budget, capital budget, incorporating the mayor's recommendations, planning and zoning, and the chief financial officer's recommendations. The question is, can they amend? I'm assuming that they are not just an empty vessel, that they would as a discretionary
Right.
body, but
I would
the
assume
language is-
so.
The language is not clear. I agree.
Right, and that's totally exactly. I
Yeah.
assume so too. I wasn't objecting to them to being able to do so. I just think the language isn't clear that that's their role here.
it could very well be one of those situations where if they don't approve, then it has to go back to the drawing board, to the common council, and things like that, rather than come up with their own thing. I mean, I'm not sure what the practice has been to date, but I can't remember anyway.
I think the way it's been done is we've sent the capital budget to the council with an amount of money. The council can move money from one to another. They can't add any new projects, but they can move, let's say we have $7 million for paving and $3 million for sidewalks. They could take 500,000 from the paving and move it to the sidewalks if they want. That was the way it's always been. That's the way we've done it.
So it's like the opposite of the operating budget, where the BET has line item veto, and the capital budget's the common council that has line item.
Yeah, kind of, if that's the way you want to look at it. They can't add any projects. They can't take away any projects, but they can transfer money from within that process, within the budget, within the recommended budget.
And then the BET has to approve it or not?
Oh, no, then it's done.
Oh, then it's done.
Yeah, then it's done.
Okay, right. Okay.
But it looks like it goes to the BET first, then to the common council.
Right.
So it's
Right.
first, yeah.
Yeah, this is the area where the council actually has more authority than it does under the under the general budget.
But the overall budget doesn't increase or decrease. It's within that category. So if it's a public works budget, and I think it's related whether you transfer more money to sidewalks as opposed to paving, it's within the same department usually. So in other words, you wouldn't go Parks and Rec giving money to Public Works.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, that
Yeah.
may be the practice. None of that is in this language that I'm seeing.
You're right.
No, I agree.
Yeah.
Can't argue with that.
Well, the thing that's not in the language is that the council may reinstate. And that's never been the process that we've used. So in other words, if we take out an item in the budget, somebody wants to spend $30 million on a widget, and we take it out, the council by this language can put that back in.
And Steve, is this the language that's in the current ordinance?
It's in the current ordinance.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
And yeah, we didn't change. We made a point of saying, look, we want to adopt what's already in existence and not modify it.
Right.
Because again, we'll leave those debates to a future discussion on structural things. And this ordinance was adopted only a couple of years ago, a few years ago. So it's not this doesn't go back to 1913. This is a relatively.
But how far back did it go, Steve? Probably the 1970s, maybe?
There might have been one, but I think there was a major revision of it just a few years ago, Mayor. I'd have to go back and look at it. I don't have.
Well, it certainly, yeah, it wasn't within the past 10 years.
Yeah. Yeah, well, there was changes because there was a lot of gender modification.
Right.
In,
And that's all it
language.
was.
So it had to be,
Yeah,
yeah, it had to be done relatively recently.
that was 2016.
That's correct. All right. Yeah. So it wasn't 1913. It was 2016. So about 103 years after the charter. So that's
Right, and it was
that's
only
okay.
gender modification. It wasn't anything
Okay,
else about
nothing
removing
substantive.
positions.
All
Yeah.
right. And then, not to speak for her since she's here, Councilmember Najolski Eichner wanted to include the words increase and add in then add in lieu of reinstate.
Right. So I just
Yeah.
don't like, I didn't like reinstate as a sort of the possibility of introducing ambiguity, because what are you reinstating, right? Like reinstate implies that there is some set of things from which the council is choosing that is not clear in the charter language as to what that would be. So if we want to keep reinstate, I think from what the mayor is suggesting, it would be reinstating projects that had been proposed in then I guess that's my question. Is can the council reinstate projects that have been proposed by anyone at any stage? Reinstate just feels ambiguous to me, and I'm trying to eliminate ambiguities. Add or increase is, you can put a new project in.
Well, I think that's why reinstate was used, because again, you're talking about
New
an
projects.
elected board of 15 people who can add things, which quite frankly, could be politically motivated. I want to add this for my constituency. I want to add this. I want to put a sidewalk on East Avenue. We need a sidewalk there because that's what the constituency has told this individual. I just think I think we really need to take a look at this. If we're going to put in there that the council can add items to the operating budget or add, and the BET must do it. I think if we're going to put in there that the council can reinstate or add things to the operating budget, I think we need to really seriously think about getting rid of the BET, because they do all the legwork. They interview all the departments. They interview the Board of Education. Let the council do that. Let the council conduct all the meetings of the Board of Education, all the departments on the operating budget and the capital budget. And you don't need the BET. The BET was put in place and to work with the mayor and work with the council to push forward the vision of the mayor based on what the mayor he or she thinks. So if we're going to take away those authorities, we don't need the BET. It's clear and simple.
And I think that's a conversation that we should have for the 2 years, no question. I think that is a very interesting conversation to have. I think for this purpose, I really am just trying to push on getting some clarity as to if our existing language, what our existing language is and says, and if it is different than our current practice. I think we need to decide whether we are codifying our existing language or our existing practice so that there's no confusion.
I don't disagree.
But let's bear in mind, and I think that once I speak with Alicia, I guess I'll be able to have more information. But let's bear in mind that we're putting together this charter to make it consistent throughout, whereas it was previously or as currently constituted, there are pieces here and there that if you put them together means could very well have resulted in the practice that we currently have. It's just not clear from one language to the next what that practice is. But piecing it all together as we're now trying to do with this charter, making it all consistent, it could very well be that our practice to date has been consistent with what the charter has mandated. When you take all the pieces and interpret them together the way that I think Alicia has in the past. To me, I was looking for her email to me of a year ago about this very issue about the.
Yeah, I'd love to see that, because what I attempted to do, council member, was to take all the sections from disparate provisions of the current charter and put them in one place. So I would have liked to have thought that I would have stumbled upon those items that Alicia was referring to. So yeah, I'd love to see that email when you find it.
Yeah, I'll email her and ask her to send it if I can't find it.
All right, wonderful.
Yeah, and as I said, this process, not only has it been used, what we're doing now has been used for the almost 10 years I've been in office, and the 8 years prior to that, when I was working as the police chief and had to go through this process as a department head. So at least for 18 years, actually with Alex Knopp as well. So at least for 22 years, this is the way we've done it. Again, it has not been consistent with what the language we see now. So I think there's some real, we have to really take an in-depth look here and do some soul searching and see exactly what we want to do, how we want the process to work. What's the best way to make the process work?
Let's yeah, we should move on that in the next few days, I guess, Mayor.
Or the next 2 years.
Or the next 2 years.
Next year's.
Yeah, I mean, you could leave it. You can leave the language as is, but again, it's obviously going to be subject to some interpretation and probably
Right.
some dispute, or and you rely on practice, or you rely on the word, and maybe Mario Capola will have to.
Well, Steve,
render
you're an
opinion.
attorney. You're an attorney. Past
Yeah.
practice takes precedent only if there's no clear and unambiguous language
Exactly. That's
in
exactly
the
right.
four corners of the document.
Exactly. So it'll be there was a corporation counsel in New Haven named Charlie Album. He used to talk about the rule of practical wisdom. That's
I like that.
one of my favorites. We named a room after him when I was corporation counsel. So all right, let's try to move through this, but I know it's getting late for everybody. And I hope, and this has been a great discussion, I have to say.
It's only
So-
10:40 and my air conditioning is broken and my house is hot.
Oh, boy.
All right, well, I'm sorry. I will move this very quickly.
No,
Mayor.
go ahead.
So, no, again, no changes in the allotments provision. It's a concept that it's kind of an ancient concept, but we've kept it here, and Henry again reviewed this. No other changes here. Let's see, Nora has raised an issue. Should this paragraph move down to part 10-20? Additional obligations. Nora, why do you think that's the case? Or Councilmember Najolski?
So, if you look at, I mean, as it begins, additional obligations, I think that, hang on, let me look at I
see.
be able to see 10A, but I think it felt to me like 10A and 10B were actually slightly different. And 10B felt like it belonged maybe more in 1020. I don't feel strongly about it. I'm just,
Yeah, I mean, restrictions, no obligations. Yeah, A does seem like a restrictions provision, and B seems like an additional obligations provision. I mean, I have no objections. So, if everybody feels comfortable with that, it's not a substantive change. Move. Is that okay with everybody? I know
Yeah.
we're not taking any official votes here.
Yeah, a lot of the clearing up some of the language and making it say what it should say is,
Right.
yeah.
All right, I will do that. Yeah, because again, I want to try to get this out ASAP so that the public has something to see what we've been working on
Right.
for the public hearing. All right, so again, mainly some editorial minor edits. And again, there are a number of questions that came up here. These required public hearings. I don't remember having a public hearing on the capital budget. Is this new? I think the answer is no. I think
No.
this is in.
Well, we just put the Planning and Zoning Commission, we combined them. They were the Planning Commission and the Zoning
Yep.
Commission until, about a year and a half ago? Maybe two, I don't know, time goes by so quickly, but we did combine them. They were separate before they were combined, and we put them back together again.
All right. Well, 10-22A is not new. It's new to the charter, but it's derived from the Code of Ordinances.
I think to Jen's question, I believe that we conducted that public hearing through the Economic and Community Development Committee of the Common Council, which might be why she was uncertain as to whether it had happened.
All right. And when the charter says the Common Council shall hold a hearing, if you have a committee structure at the Common Council, it's perfectly appropriate that the committee of jurisdiction would be
Right.
conducting the hearing on behalf of the council. And the council would vote in plenary session following a deliberation on items, unless it's determined that you want to have a committee of the whole, have the entire council do that. So I marked this. Why else? Because I think.
So yeah, so my
You have a
my
question
point was
already,
just was just technical. Some of this language I think is like the limiting free expression of the public. I just don't think this got cleaned up to line up with your public notice, public hearings provisions. And I think it'd be great if it could. I think there's just some archaic language here.
And I don't see it in here, but the BET also holds a public hearing on the capital budget.
Yeah.
We do it on the same night that we have, I believe, the same night we have the hearing on the operating budget, right, Jim?
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yes.
For form,
And,
but,
yeah,
but that's not exactly a public. Oh, actually, it is.
Yeah, that's
I thought that
public.
was- We
yeah,
actually,
it's a public hearing,
yeah, and then we vote, and then we go into the operating budget public.
right?
Is
And
that
actually, we-
referenced above, though? Is
I'm
that,
sorry?
is that stated above that, the Board of Estimate?
I don't see it in
Yeah.
here.
Not
Uh,
in, not in the
I'm not sure
capital.
Not in
I don't
this
think it's-
section, but in their section.
It might be, but you would
But
think that it
Steve-
would be. Whoops, you would think that it would be in the. I'm sorry, am I muted? You're not hearing me?
No, you-
No, we can hear
I
you.
would think that it would be in this provision. It's not in the ordinance, I guess, is what it's not. So we should probably include the Board of Estimate in here as well. Right?
Yeah,
Yeah, I
I
would think
think,
so.
yeah, I think we should, I think, I'm not, I guess the Planning and Zoning Commission does hold a public hearing because then they come back with their recommendations. And then the recommendations are sent to me. And then I look at them and I add or subtract or change whatever, and I send a message back to them as to what I've done and also to the council.
Okay. I'll fix that. That's kind of a I'll take care of that. All right, very good. And then we have administration. Again, these are all taken from the current ordinance, the borrowing provisions. I did have bond counsel take a look at this, and I think he made a slight change to it, nothing substantial. And
Yeah.
I
But
think
Steve, what about 10-23? Saying that the council has to do an ordinance. They already have done an ordinance. So why did we
Well,
take that out?
well, no, because there still may be an ordinance. They're gonna have to modify the ordinance that's on the books. And there may be ordinance that they would establish that further elucidates some of the general requirements of the charter. So that's the only, and this is also dealing with the implementation and oversight of the program. Because I think that there is an ordinance that addresses it. This just simply makes it clear that they should have an ordinance and they should periodically look at it to make sure it's up to date. It's just a general authority clause.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I think that's pretty much it on the body. Let's look at one last section here.
Yeah.
Section 11, then I'll explain chapters 12, section articles 11 or 12 and 13 as we go through here. Nora did point out that there's nothing about constitutionality in the savings clause, so I took that word out. I'm going to take a look at 11-3 to see whether there should be a reference to CBAs. I'm usually pretty good at doing that, and I will double check. This is new language that whatever we have to do has to be consistent with CBAs. It's a given, but I like to refer to it in charters because very often you run into charter language that says X, and you have a collective bargaining agreement that says Y, and the public doesn't understand why the charter doesn't work. And you have to explain to them that CBAs have authority and precedence over charters and basically trump your local charter. So that's that. And let's explain the rest of the charter to you. I'm going to go into the table of contents rather than zoom through over 100 pages of stuff in those sections. And I'll let the mayor get back to his unair conditioned home without the encumbrance of a public meeting. very quickly. Let's get through here. So transition. So part two, we've split the charter up so that you'll see that the part of the charter that most of the public is going to need is about 88 pages long. It's part one. Part two of the charter, then part three will probably be in a combined volume. One is the taxing districts. And what we did was we took all the as you may recall, if you look at your current charter, the charter starts off with about 100 plus pages about the taxing districts before you get to anything in the body of your document. We did the reverse here. We put the taxing districts not at the end, but after after we finished going through the way the general government is supposed to work. And so no substantive changes whatsoever in the section. There are new provisions here that were in the general provisions of the charter, like you'll see 12-2 or powers of the council on public lighting that deals with the taxing districts. Rather than have it in the council section, we put it back into the taxing district section because it's pertinent and it makes sense to have all those powers related to the taxing districts consolidated in one place. We will fix in the final version the appearance of that section with all the indents and make sure they all work. We have in part 3, Article 13, some historical provisions. I would hope that in the course of the next 2 years, when you do the charter revision, we couldn't determine whether these needed to remain or not. So we just left them in a historical provision section. I don't think they do any damage to the charter, but they are historical provisions that maybe could go away, but I've gotten no definitive answers on them. So we kind of put them in this one place, and I would recommend you look at it in 2 years. Article 14 should be gone in 2 years. 14.1 are your historical council districts. The charter recognizes Baker versus Carr, which is the redistricting Supreme Court case from, I think, 1962. Any lawyers in the room could correct me on that date. And you're going to have to update your districts in accordance with reapportionment and redistricting. The other sections all relate to current charter provisions pertaining to finance, controller, purchasing agent, tax collector, public works. Most of these provisions don't need to remain in the charter. They're probably covered by the Municipal Powers Act. And so we've recommended transfer to the Code of Ordinances. And when they're transferred, the Corporation Council will have to issue an opinion indicating that the functions that were set forth are met by the replacement ordinance. Once that occurs, or that the functions are otherwise provided for in the Municipal Powers Act, then Article 14 will go by the wayside. So after redistricting and after all of the changes that are made in 14 through 6, lose those sections from the charter. They'll automatically transition out of the charter. That is it, ladies and gentlemen.
Steve, before we close the meeting, I personally want to thank you. I think you've done a remarkable job in making a very convoluted document understandable, navigable, so that the average citizen, everybody can read it, understand what it says, and really understand what their government's all about. So I want to thank you personally for what you've done. I think you've done a remarkable job.
Well, thank you, Mayor. And I have to say, I've said this to people throughout the state, my experience in Norwalk has to be one of the best experiences I've had on charters, because there's been enormous cooperation between a mayor and the council, and our commission has been an outstanding commission. So I can't be happier. I'm also working next door, and if you're reading the newspapers, you'll be seeing, you could see how difficult some of the things are next door and interesting.
Oh, I know.
In Stamford. Yeah, we had one of these days we'll talk about it. But thank you very, very much. I appreciate it. And before we leave, though, I want to make sure: are we doing a public hearing on Monday, Mr. President?
That is the proposed plan. We have not sent out a communication publicly as of yet, but as we look at item 5 on the special meeting agenda, we have dates listed here, starting with July 10th, the public hearing and deliberation, July 17th, council action, July 19th, conferral, meeting with the Charter Revision Commission, and then the July 26th, Charter Revision Commission final report. So we want to do everything within our control to meet these dates, which starts with the Monday, July 10th public hearing. The time has not been set as of yet. There's other meetings that are scheduled for that will involve council members on Monday, July 10th. So working on that as soon as possible, first thing tomorrow morning.
Okay, good.
Okay.
So maybe you, Zuma, and I will talk, make sure we get the notice out. And I will at some point during the course of the day tomorrow have a markup of the charter. I mean, the public has seen the document. There's no substantive change since we sent the document to you. But I think it would be useful to have the public see the markup that I've made based on discussions and based on what we think the trend is and where things are going to go. I think in terms of transparency, I think that would be very helpful. So we'll talk tomorrow. Then I have to make sure I get the doc ready for publication posting tomorrow.
And thank you. I want to thank
last-
Patsy.
yeah.
I want to thank
I just wa-
Patsy and the
Okay.
chair of the Charter Revision Commission and all the members of the Charter Revision Commission. I know they put in a lot of time, a lot of energy. I think they've really done a yeoman's job on making this, like I said, working with you, Steve, and working with the department heads. I know the time that you allocated to this process was phenomenal, and I for one appreciate it, and I know all the members of the council do too.
Thank you, Mayor. I need to just add one thing. I have reached out to the first, second, third, and sixth districts to ask to be present at one of their meetings in September to just answer any of their questions or concerns about the charter. And so I thought that was an important thing for us to do, to have them understand that we have not changed any of the sections that relative to the districts.
I think, Carl, Mr. Dickens, you have a comment.
Yes, Your Honor. It's just a request that the more people we can get turned out at the public hearings, the better.
Mhm.
And since we're kind of limited on media in our town, if any of you have mailing lists or any way you can contact your constituents or get the word out, it would be greatly appreciated and helpful, I think, by doing that.
Thank you. Any other comments from any council person? I'm not sure we need it, but Ms. Revolus,
Motion to adjourn.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And it is 10:56 and we are officially adjourned. Thank you.
Good
Ms.
night,
Smith,
everyone.
Ms.
Bye-bye.
Smith, I'm sorry.
Oops.
Ms. Smith?
No, I'm just saying I agree to adjourn.
Oh, okay, very good. Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you all
you.
for your
Thanks,
time.
everybody.
I truly appreciate it.
Good night.